In this video, we're going to go from this to this. Okay, so here's about everything you'll need for the project. You'll need a good log, a tape measure, a hammer, a chisel for removing the bark, a chainsaw, a sander, and a grinder with sandpaper disc. So to get started, I start by measuring 3.5 inches from the top of the table. I want to keep a minimum of 3.5 inches for all of the edges. So you can see there, I measured down 3.5 inches and I made my first mark. Here I'm making the second mark, and I'll make a third or fourth mark, and I'll connect those marks to form one line, and that'll be the guide that I used for the chainsaw. And the plan here is to take out one chunk right in the middle, and then take out a chunk down below so I can have some legs remaining. So I'm going to measure from the 3.5 inches. I'm going to measure another 10 inches down, and that'll be the lower part. So that'll be kind of the magazine rack, if you will. So the lines are a bit faint on the camera, but it's pretty easy to see them in person. Alright, so from that 10-inch line, I'm going to measure another 3.5 inches down and make some more marks there. And this will be for the second piece that I cut out. Alright, you see I'm holding the ruler kind of from the, just looking down, just eyeballing it, and I'm just kind of looking straight down and just kind of eyeballing 3.5 inches. And then I'm just making a mark on the log. So this is kind of the edge. So it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a chainsaw cut, but it'll be pretty close in the end result. And if there's any pencil markings left, not a big deal. They're going to come out once we sand and grind later on. And again here, I'm just measuring out 3.5 inches from what looks to be the side of the log and just making a mark there. So you can kind of see the box there in the middle. So there's the first piece we're going to remove, and there's the second piece. Okay, so I'm getting the bar of the saw in line with the marks that I had made. And I'm going to start, I don't have it on full speed here, I'm just kind of have the saw on lightly. I just want to kind of etch some lines for me to follow later on. And I gotta be careful here. I don't want to go above or below the marks. I want to stay within so I don't have any extra cuts in the log. So it'll look pretty, the edges will be pretty clean when it's done. And this log, this is a hickory. So this is very hard wood, so even if I have the saw at full power, it won't look like I'm cutting very fast, even though I know the chain is sharp. And this is an 18-inch bar, and this is a 59cc. And it's a Shindaiwa. Shindaiwa saws are now made by Echo. So once I get the edges drawn, I start getting into the sides a little bit, then I'm basically doing a plunge cut, and I want to go about all the way down until I can feel the bar poke through. And you want to be careful not to go too far. As we'll see later on, I get the tip of the bar into the mulch just a little bit, but as long as you're not getting into the dirt. If you get into the dirt, it'll go dull almost immediately. And if you're watching right here, I can just start to feel the end of the bar go through the other side of the log, so I know I'm deep enough there. So as I'm making these edges, these starting cuts, I always use the tip of the saw, tip of the bar. I never want to use the very front of it. I'm always using the kind of the lower tip. I'm always worried about kickback, and I always make sure I have some downward pressure to make sure the saw can't pop up. And if you haven't done much cutting with a chainsaw, I wouldn't recommend this to be your first thing. There can be some dangerous parts, especially when doing the plunge cuts. It's more likely to kick back and try to pop out of the wood. So just make sure you're always using kind of the bottom part of the tip or bottom part of the bar, and always keep downward pressure on the saw. Of course, I've got a helmet on right now, so even if it did pop up, it would hit my shield, so I should be fine, but I should probably be using steel toe boots or some other form, but I've been pretty careful here not to get the saw anywhere near my feet. Making the edge cuts on this first side, this is the easiest part. The hardest part will be getting to join this side and the back side. But the trick here is to make sure you get your saw going all the way through on each of these edges. Then when you flip the log over, you'll be able to see where it popped out, and you'll be able to follow those same lines until that block in the middle comes out. So now it's time to flip the log and see where the lines match up on the other side, and to start cutting from that side. And I'm wedging some other wood or some bark underneath the log, just because I don't want this thing rolling around. I want it to be as stable as it can be. And the ground here is a little bit sloped. You can't really tell on the camera, but it does have some force pushing the log in front of me from this point of view. So putting some bark on the side closest to me keeps the log pretty stable. Now you can see those plunge cuts. You can see where the bar had come through on this side. So I'm just redrawing some lines based on where the bar came out. And you'll see the line there on the left. You'll see it looks a little curved, but once we finish the cut, once we start sanding, we can make that really disappear. It'll look like a normal line. When you're cutting through a log that's grown over 60 years, sometimes you never know what's inside of it. And right here coming up, I'm about to hit some metal. And I didn't know it was metal until I pulled out the block, and then I saw some black or some gray streaking. So I pull the saw out, and then I put some wedges in, because I know when I finish off cutting the last little part of this block, it'll drop to the side nearest the saw and usually pinches the bar. And everything looks pretty good on this side. Looks like I've got all the way to the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and flip the log maybe one more time and see if I can clean up just a little bit more in the corners. But that still didn't quite do it, so I'm going to flip the log one more time to finish it off. I can see now the little bits of wood that's holding that block in place. So the block is finally ready to come out, and as it flips over, you'll be able to see that gray streaking right there, and that is right where the saw bar got caught, and that dulled the chain almost instantly. The edges look really clean here. I didn't take any cuts outside of the lines that I had drawn, so now it's time to finish off that last lower piece. So just like when I was cutting the block, I need to go all the way through on this side, so I'll have a guide to follow when I flip the log over. And you see the smoke coming out of the chain. This chain is really dull. I still haven't sharpened it since I hit the metal. I'm trying to finish this log, but I'm not going to be able to. So I'll take a break here shortly, and I'll sharpen the chain. to sharpen it. Alright, and it's out. Now you can see the legs there. Finally little cleanups here. The top isn't perfectly smooth, so I'm going to take this chain and just run it along that edge there and see if I can just flatten out a little bit more. This wood is so hard that using a sander or a grinder, they just can't get through this wood that's on the top. And there it is. You can see the edges are pretty clean. I didn't go over any of the lines. The top is pretty flat. We're ready for the next step of sanding. So here I am. We have a grinder here. And it has a sandpaper disc on it. And this wood is so hard that it's struggling. You'll see it leaves some black marks here and there, as it's really burning the wood instead of removing it. But this grinder, it's only good for removing the bark. But that's really all I'm trying to remove here anyway. So I use the grinder on the outside of the log, and then I'll use a sander on the top and on all of the edges. So I want to get the edges nice and rounded and smooth, and I try to get the top as smooth as I can. And the grinder sandpaper grit is about 40, I believe. Maybe it's 80. And the sander, I've got a 40 grit on. And in normal sanding activities, you want to do a gradual change in the grit, but I'm going straight from 40 to 320. So I'm going to do 40 on all of the edges, and then I'm going to do 3 and on the top, and I'm going to do 320 after the 40. And usually you'll see pigtails in wood, but this wood is so hard, it's really not even leaving any pigtails. It's very difficult to remove any, even with the 40 grit. So the 320 gives it kind of a smooth polish, and I will hit the edges with the 320 as well, and that just gives it a really smooth finish. And after the sanding is finished, it's finally time for the best part. I'm using a mineral oil here. You can use any finish you choose, but I'm using a mineral oil because I like the color that it brings out. And if I choose to coat it later with some other oil finish, I could do that. But this is also a green wood. It's not completely dried out, so I don't want something that will cause rot. After letting it sit in the garage overnight, I bring it inside to show the finished product. Now here's a look at a few more that I've made.